This is Alexis Renee. I am your host from Beyond the Ashes. Today we are welcomed by Jennifer. We're going to let her share her story, and she's going to go and tell yourself a little bit about herself. It is going to talk about domestic violence, and there's going to be a conversation about how one did not make it and they were murdered. So if at any moment in time you need to pause and this is just too much, you are welcome to do so. Hi, Jennifer. How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing good.
Good. So, if you want to share who you are and why you were wanting to come on and willing to share your story.
My name is Jennifer, and we actually met through a mutual friend of ours. I wanted to come on and kind of discuss domestic violence from a different point of view. Having lost my sister, we usually hear about, the parents' loss, the grief of from the parents from losing their child. To any kind of a situation, doesn't have to be domestic violence. It can, be some other kind of death or passing. And so, really bringing it from a sibling's perspective, I thought would be really educational and maybe would make people feel like they're not so alone.
I like that. And I also like you're actually a first one that's coming on to talk about how sadly someone did not make it from domestic violence. We hear a lot of stories about how women do make it out or men make it out from the domestic violence, but there's really horrific tragedies where they don't. So if you want to tell us a little bit, I know so shout out to Desiree, Unfearlessly Unfiltered. That's where we met. Was we both co guest starred as on her podcast, and that's how we met and got to connect and learn a little bit about each other's backgrounds. And I was like, I would really like to have her on my podcast and kind of share with others. I know Jennifer, you did not know your sister by that time. You never got to meet her.
Right, right. So I'll just kind of jump into the story. So I was, and for some context, I think, because people are kind of like, wait, you didn't know your sister passed away. How do you not know your sister? Um, so growing up, I thought that the man who raised me was my dad. Um, I didn't know any different. When you're young, you don't understand those things. So when I was 11 years old, my mom and my stepdad were actually fighting outside. And I heard my mother say something along the lines of, "Well, Jennifer's not your daughter anyway. Why do you care?" And I popped out from behind the bush because I'd come outside to ask if I could do something or, to talk to my dad or talk to my mom. And I overheard her yell this. And of course, at 11 years old, you think, what? You don't understand what she meant by that. I heard her say it and thought, Dad's not my dad. And I mean, when I popped out from behind that bush, the look of horror on my mom's face basically said everything that I needed to know. Um, my dad turned around and he proceeded to try to calm me down. And I was having no part of it. I started crying and screaming, and he picked me up and took me across the street to my neighbor's house, who is a good friend of his. And I was kicking and screaming, saying, "You're not my dad, put me down. You're not my dad, put me down." Because as a kid, you don't understand that stuff. You don't understand. All I heard was my mom say that. And so now, who is this man who's claiming to be my dad, who's not? Um, when I was well, okay. And then I basically got no answer from my mother. I tried asking her, and she basically shut down and would not tell me anything about who my biological father was. And I can understand that to a certain extent because I was only 11. When I was 16, um, we were driving down the freeway, and my mom she used to interpret when she was in her younger years. and she was interpreting ASL to some song or something. And I was like, Mom, stop, you're embarrassing me, like cut it out. And, the typical teenager stuff, you get embarrassed by your parents. And
Mm.
she said, Well, I taught your brother sign language and he didn't have a problem with it. And I thought, I have a brother? Wait, what? I, because I know I had a younger sister from my mom. So I'm going through my head and I'm thinking maybe I misheard her. Maybe she was saying, her brother or, something to that effect. I didn't it didn't quite click. And then she basically said, "Oh, they're your dad, your biological dad had two children from a previous marriage, and they're your step siblings." Well, of course, they're not my step siblings; they're my half siblings. So I started to really get interested because if I had two siblings that I didn't know about, then what what does this all mean? So I started looking for my siblings. Um, I actually went out to the garage to go empty the trash, because that's where we kept our trash cans. And there was a little, like the little bathroom garbage cans, the little tiny ones, and it had some papers and stuff in it, and it had an envelope. And there were pictures of my dad, my brother, and my sister in this little envelope in this trash can. And I saw like kid drawings. So I was like, well, these have got to be mine. So I started looking through it and I came across that envelope and pulled it out and was looking at these pictures. And I had never seen a picture of my dad or my siblings before that point. And on the back, of course, they were labeled. So I took them in the house and I basically confronted my mom and said, is this my dad and my siblings? And she was not very happy that I had found them, the pictures. And she was just like, "You need to give those back to me." And I was like, "No, I'm keeping them. They're mine." Um, so I kind of started to put the puzzle pieces together. She finally told me basically their first name, their birthday, and the last place that she knew that they had lived. Just the city. So I like mentally noted that. Like I was not going to forget, right? So I started searching on MySpace at 16. And of course, MySpace at that time was very popular. Facebook had not even been invented yet. So that's aging me a little bit. Um, and so I started searching and I searched off and on for about 3 years. And I basically came across at 19, 3 years later, I came across a um, page that was my sister's name. I decided to search for her, but she was several years older than me, so I didn't know if she had been married, if anything like that had happened. So I did a search for her, and on like by the end of like the second page, I was like, okay, I'm going to not keep looking. I'm just going to put this aside for a while, if at all, if I was going to keep searching at all. And on the third page at the very top was my sister's memorial MySpace page. It had her name. It had her birthday, which I knew from 3 years earlier when my mom had told me, and it had survived by her mom's name, which my mom had also told me her mother's first name, and it had my brother's name. And I thought, this can't be my sister. I thought, there's no way. And it didn't really, I was in denial, let's just put it that way. I called my best friend and I was like, hey, I need you to look at this MySpace page. Like, I think this could be my sister. And she was just like, well, write to the page and see what happens. But it's not clicking in my brain that she's deceased. So I go to the friends list and I'm looking through the friends list and I'm like, okay, my brother would have to be on her friends list, right? Because they were biological siblings. So I started looking for my brother, but I didn't see my brother listed on her friends list. But I did find her stepdad, or the guy that was listed as her dad. And I wrote to him and I just said, hey, um, here's the deal. I'm hoping I found the right family. And, their dad's name is this. And he ended up getting the message. So I'm sitting there like wondering, is this my sister? And then the next day he gets the message and says to my brother, because my brother was actually at their house, he goes outside and he's like, hey, do you know somebody by the name of Jennifer? This and this and this. And my brother like stopped dead in his tracks and was like, yeah, that's my sister. Why? Because our dad had told him about me when he was a teenager. And so basically, my brother had to tell me that our sister had passed away just 2 months prior. And that I know had to have been hard on his part. Um, but
And yours, because you didn't even get to like develop that relationship or get to know her or anything.
right, right. And that's the hard thing is that, my mother even said, you didn't know her. Why are you so upset that she's gone? And it's like, because she's still my sister. That's
Still
still
your,
that's
she's still
still
your
my
sister.
sister.
That's your blood. And you're probably even more sad. It's a different grieving process because you did not get to meet her. But then when you add in the factor of how she passed away.
Right. Yeah. And she, obviously, we're talking about, her passing away from domestic violence. Her boyfriend did take her life. And what was really crazy about it was that my mom's parents literally lived 5 minutes from my sister within walking distance. I had probably passed by the street that she lived on 100 times and had no idea that she was right there. My brother lived about 7 to 10 minutes from my grandparents, and I had passed by where he lived on multiple occasions and had no idea that my brother was right there. Um, so the fact that they lived so close to each other as well, my siblings as adults lived very close to my mom's parents, and I had no idea that, they were basically right under my nose. Um, so yeah, my sister had passed away. Her boyfriend just basically snapped. Um, and for whatever reason, took her life. We don't know, other than what I was told that, he started to become more controlling and was kind of separating her from her family and her friends and, the whole thing, what they all do, the isolation and
Mm-hmm. Finally,
emotional.
isolation and the controlling because they want to be in charge of everything.
Right, right. Which is really hard. And my sister was one to not put up with that kind of thing. And then come to find out after she passed away that she had been approved for an apartment. So she was trying to leave him. So that is probably what also happened was that he found out she was trying to leave or.
Yes, which I know there's a lot of studies done. Like, if you do not have a safety plan in place and you don't have a plan or financial means to leave, um, sometimes it's easier to stay because then you're not worrying. Like, they're still going to snap and react and do what they're going to do and be abusive, but then you have a lesser chance to getting murdered. So it's why I always say that it's very, very important to have a safety plan in place, but make sure that safety plan is like silent and quiet because if they know about the safety plan, that is usually when they react and that is usually when they snap and that is when they lose it. And it's really heartbreaking and it's really sad. And I have seen and heard many stories that you would think in 2026 would not be happening as much. Like you think we'd be better educated, or what really is a bummer. And so, a little side note, which I thought was interesting. We're filming this movie And then there was a line in there where someone had asked why it took so long for her to report. And a lot of people don't realize when you report someone for domestic violence, they usually get away with it. They usually do not get charged. They usually get a slap on the wrist, or they say, oh, we can't do anything until something seriously happens. Well, by that point, it's too late. And it's absolutely heartbreaking and it's absolutely frustrating. And I wish there would be more education with the judges and with the courts and the police of like, hey, this is narcissistic abuse. These are the signs of narcissistic abuse. If this is happening, it should still be considered abuse and they should still be disciplined for it because if we just continue to allow it, then you have the sad story about your sister or others. And I'm really sorry because it's heartbreaking. I didn't even know her, and I'm heartbroken because
Yeah.
she should never have, she should still be here.
Yeah. And the thing is too, is it's like how do you process that when, I didn't know my sister, but I was grieving the loss. I was grieving the fact that I would never get to see her and hear her voice and be able to, make memories with her. But I did, thankfully, her best friend, they used to film stuff when they were like teenagers. So I do have a video from when they were like 17. She passed away when she was 24. And in fact, this November, well, no, this September is 20 years that she's been gone.
Oh, wow. It's
Yeah,
already been that long, huh?
yeah.
Time goes by fast.
It really does. She passed away in 2006.
Okay.
And so she passed away uh, September 6th or September 8th. They're not sure because she was not heard from for a couple of days. Um, so I think they said it's like they, you know, have it as like September 8th, but they actually think that she could have passed away a couple days before that. But she literally passed away right after Steve Irwin passed away. So the why I'm saying that is because my sister was a huge animal advocate. She worked for an animal shelter. I mean, she would adopt, chickens, snakes,
Oh, all
cats,
those things.
she had a horse, I have pictures of her with like snakes wrapped around her wrist and like,
Oh gosh, no, thank you.
oh,
I'm not a snake person.
yeah,
No,
I'm not either.
thanks.
I'm not either. So I was
No.
just like, my sister is kind of crazy, but but she loved all animals. And so the just the weird thing about her passing away like right after Steve Irwin. Um and then I found my brother the weekend before Thanksgiving of that year. So like I said, I had written her dad a message and he got it the next day, I believe. Yeah, the next day. And then um he goes outside and tells my brother, and my brother contacts me, and I had not. See, the thing is that I had not told my mom that I had done this, that I had actually, think that I had found her, and that I had written to the stepdad. I just went ahead and did it all, and when I told her, because I was like, oh my gosh, this is my brother, she was not happy. And, like we discussed in Desiree's podcast, I grew up with a very narcissistic mother, very controlling, um, obviously. And, I was lied to about a lot of things growing up. And so I also had to process that along with losing my sister, that I had been lied to. And so the weekend after Thanksgiving, my brother and I had decided to meet up, and my mom went with me because she was like, you're not going alone. But when he had called me, she took the phone and answered it, and she started asking him all these questions about things that I had no idea that she knew all of this stuff about my brother and my sister when they were growing up, um that was suddenly revealed to me. So I was in a very state of shock already, and that just added to it. So when my brother and I met up with my mom, um, you know, my dad was still alive. And when we were leaving the place where we met, my brother decides to call my dad and say, "Hey, Jennifer found me. Do you want to talk to her?" And so I was, processing losing my sister, but also gaining my brother and gaining my dad. So it was kind of like mixed feelings. Uh,
Hmm.
and, to find out that I had been lied to, obviously was really, really hard because you don't ever expect that your parent is going to lie to you. And people can say, oh, she was just trying to protect you or this and that. And that's not the case with her at all. It was to protect herself. Um, Basically also just like grieving my sister from then on out was kind of more like when my brother and I would hang out because we would hang out often, at least once a month. Every couple of months I would go down and spend like the weekend with him. And it was really hard because I was trying to get to know him, but not trying to get to know him because of my sister. So I wouldn't bring up my sister. Um, I maybe brought her up like one or two times, but I knew that he was grieving the loss too. And so I didn't want it to make it seem like I'm coming into the picture trying to replace her, right?
Hmm.
Because,
Hmm.
people could see it that way.
Hmm.
And I didn't want to make it seem like, oh, he lost a sister, he gained a sister. She's trying to act like her sister, and that's not the case at all. So we built a relationship, but every once in a while she would get brought up, like I would do something or say something that would remind him of our sister. And I would just kind of laugh and say, "Oh, haha, that's funny," because of course we're siblings, so we're going to do things similar or talk similar. And but I'm much more like my brother than I was my sister. Like she was very artsy, very like just everybody loved her kind of thing. And so I'm more kind of reserved like my brother. Um, but it's very hard because it's like you don't want to step on toes, with her family and her friends. And her best friend, unfortunately, still kind of won't talk to me. I tried to reach out to her because, if anybody knew my sister, it would have been her. My brother had left home when he was like just just right out of high school. And so he wasn't around during my sister's teenage years, so he didn't know a whole lot about her during that period of time. And, I thought, okay, well, if anybody knew her really well, it would have been her. And,
Right.
you know, so I've had to respect the fact that, her best friend wants no part of me or anything like that. And that's okay. I don't hold any ill will. I just wanted to get to know who
Who your sister was.
who she was
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
hear
that's
it
really
from
hard.
somebody who knew her best.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and so I had to let that go. But as far as I know, the rest of my brother's family have been, pretty welcoming towards me. Um, even his stepdad. I had gone over to their house a couple of times, to his stepdad's house, and so that was really cool. Um, but just trying to build a relationship, stepping on eggshells because it's like I don't want to act like my sister. I don't want to
Right.
remind him of her. Um, and
It's
then
a really hard situation to get put into, I feel like, because you're
yeah,
just wanting to get to know all these people and you're trying to reach out and you're trying to find them. And then all of a sudden you find them and it's not what you were expecting. That's really hard. It's really
yeah.
hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And you get the feeling of like, I should have found her sooner. Um,
uh-huh. That's
But
got to be hard.
that's, yeah. And, she was only 24. Um, so it's like, okay, if I had found her at 16, I would have had 3 years with her. But at the same time, you can't dwell on that. But I did for about the first like 2, 3 years of
Yeah.
finding her.
I bet it helped educated you about domestic violence though, too.
Yeah, it did. And I started really seeing the signs amongst like friends of mine and family, and I really started to dive into that. Um,
Hmm.
I really started to try to understand not only domestic violence but narcissism. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, I mean, trying to find, hope and healing. I mean, it's been 20 years. So now it's kind of just at a point where, my sister existed. She's a part of me, but I'm not dwelling on it so much. Um, I I do it kind of I don't necessarily like the word trigger, but it does in a sense when I see something like that happening with a friend of mine, and I'm
Hmm.
like, okay, time out. Whoa, you need to do something about this because this is a red flag. And
And it's really, and what the hard part though from being with, okay, because I was in a domestic violence situation. Um, It is really easy to see it when other people have it and be like, hey, this is going on. You need to stop. What are you doing? And then they can turn around and say, oh, hey, this is happening to you and you need to stop. And you're like, no, it's not. No, it's not. I'm fine. Everything's okay. It's not that big of a deal. Oh, he didn't mean it. Oh, that only happened one time. Oh, he was just in a bad mood. Oh, this, oh, that. And then you look back and you're like, wow, I was really blinded. I see it with other people, but why can't I see it in my relationship?
right,
Yeah.
right, and it's the whole blinders thing,
Hmm.
Um, but I have had situations where I showed up at 3 o'clock in the morning with a baseball bat at my friend's place because her boyfriend had beat her. I've realized that I have zero tolerance for it.
Hmm.
Period.
Which is good.
If Yeah, um, I started dating my boyfriend, and I told him, I'm like, look, if you ever lay a hand on me, you better make sure you knock me out because I'm coming back swinging. I will fight back. Uh,
And that's
you
good.
know,
It is really, really important. It is very important to be able to like know how to defend yourself and protect yourself in those situations, whatever way that is. So I'm glad that you do that. And I'm glad you're a really good friend that you're willing to come over there with the bat at 3 in the morning and make sure she's safe.
yeah. Um, so, also, trying to balance. So, coming at the domestic violence thing from the point of view of a sibling, it's hard because when my sister passed away, I could see that my dad, who wasn't in my siblings' lives when they were growing up, I mean, he was in and out of my brother's life, but he wasn't really a part of my sister's life. I can I could see the guilt. Um, and I think he didn't know how to deal with that. And so you see from the siblings' point of view, the parents breaking down. I remember when I went to my brother's mom's house for the first time a couple months after I found him. He took me over there, and I was really nervous, to be honest, because, here I am, and her daughter is gone. And I could see that his mom was really like withdrawn. And I could see with my dad that he had a lot of guilt, but my dad didn't know how to process that and deal with it in any aspect of his life. And so I could see that my dad was kind of like, okay, I need to try to be a dad, but it's like too late for that. So the guilty feelings and everything around losing my sister, um, he really started to like become like a lot more like spiritual and things like that after she passed away. Um, and I think, they all deal with it in a different sense because, no parent should ever have to lose a child. So I was having to kind of navigate my dad and not bring up my sister.
It
So
is. I bet it was really hard. He got to gain this beautiful child, his beautiful daughter that he didn't get to have a relationship with all those years. All while at the same time, 2 months prior, his other daughter passed away. He was probably trying to grieve also about grieving what he missed with you, but looking forward to what he could develop with you while also grieving that she was gone. Like, as a parent, because I'm a mom, I can't even imagine that. Like, I mean, that's really, really hard.
yeah, and I think that trying to process that in his from his point of view, um, you know, we could say, well, he wasn't a part of his daughter's life. Why would he care? Well, that's still his flesh and blood.
Hmm.
That's still his daughter. That's still so. I felt like for the first many years that I was kind of navigating all of this. And so coming at it from a sibling's point of view, you know, yes, I lost my sister, but it's a whole different thing because now you're having to sort of navigate through the the parent's loss.
Hmm.
And they change. I'm not saying necessarily that my dad changed, but I know that it affected him.
Right.
And
Oh.
yeah,
So I have a question out of curiosity, if you could share with the audience. What would you tell someone who's in a domestic violence situation right now, um, on getting out?
I think what I would always tell my friends was, and it wasn't to like guilt them or anything like that. It was, I remember when my friend called me in the middle of the night and I showed up with a baseball bat. I had a very long discussion with her and I told her, I was like, look, I don't want to lose you the same way that I lost my sister.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want that to happen to you. Um, kind of not begging necessarily, but just saying, hey, look, if you need help getting out, I'm here. Um, just having somebody to tell somebody, you know what I mean? Tell
Mm-hmm.
somebody what is going on. You know, when you're in the situation, there's blinders, there's, oh, but I love him, oh, but he loves me, oh, all the excuses.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, you don't know what is going to happen or not happen. You can't tell yourself, oh, he won't do anything. Or, I'm sorry, but men are even abused from by women. I know, know,
100%.
you know,
100%.
I know that my mother was abusive towards a couple of the men that she was with. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and there's the verbal abuse, the emotional abuse. There's,
And
not
they still
have to
count.
be right, and it doesn't have to be physical. So,
Correct.
you know, coming from that perspective too. So I really use my situation to say, hey, I care about you. I don't want this to happen to you. I don't want your family to lose you. And, oh, but nothing's going to happen. They're not going to do anything. I understand that you believe that,
But it doesn't mean
but
that they won't snap.
right, exactly.
I know someone, they were in a relationship and they wouldn't punch them, but they would punch the wall. Usually, when they're punching the wall,
Yeah.
there's more of a likelihood that they're going to eventually punch you.
Yeah.
There's no, so I've always said you really have to try to judge when you're in a relationship and see how they respond when they're upset with you. Because if they're trying to pick a fight, and yell and say mean things and hurtful things, or they go and punch a wall, that is a red flag to run. And when I say run, run. I've learned that the hard way because it shouldn't be so overwhelming and stressful. Like you can have disagreements. Totally normal and healthy to have disagreements. It's unhealthy when they disrespect you and they yell at you and they scream at you and they hit things or they throw things or they hit you. Really, it should be where you guys can sit down calmly and talk about your feelings and talk about why you're upset and why you're feeling that way. So I think you're 100% right. Like honestly, I agree. And you said something that I thought was very important. It is very important to be able to have a support system and have someone supporting that you can go to, that you can trust. And I noticed when I went through my domestic violence situation, I went through my abuse relationship and stuff, I kind of started losing those people because I just kept going back to that person. I just kept going back to that person, kept going back to that person. So I was starting to lose my supportive system. And eventually, when I finally did decide to leave, I didn't have anybody. I had a couple people, but it wasn't like it was in the beginning. And so I say this with caution because I've seen so many people who go through an abusive relationship. They finally have the desire to leave. They finally leave, one and finally, like for good, and they don't have any support. And so for the people, an audience listening, if you're not in an abusive relationship, but you know someone who is, I know it can be really, really hard to want to cut them off because you're just exhausted. You've told them over and over again and you're just exhausted and you're like they're not listening. And what I can say is pray about it, talk to God about it, and just do what Jesus would do and keep being supportive, keep loving them, keep being there for them because if you walk away, there's more likelihood that they definitely will not leave. Sometimes you just have to be persistent. It took me 5 times until I finally said I was done. And statistically, it's usually 7 times. Um, so, yes, supporting system is a very, very important thing. So, I just have to say, you're a wonderful friend for bringing a bat at 3 a.m., making sure she is safe.
And to add on to that, it's very hard to understand because I don't know why my sister didn't call her dad, her stepdad. I don't know why my sister didn't call my brother because my brother had moved back home just months before she passed away. I don't know why, and they had a good relationship. I don't understand why she didn't call them. Why, especially her stepdad, because they were really close. Um, and, I asked if there was some kind of, issue between her and them, and they were like, no. Like, and so I believe that here's the other thing is that she probably thought that she could handle it herself.
She probably thought she could handle it
And
herself 100%.
right.
But also, like I said, like, so for at least for me, the reason why I never shared it was one, because I didn't think no one was gonna believe me. Two, I thought he would get away with it. And, um, my abuser did not, like, I went to court, went to trial, did all the things, and he got away with it. Um, And you are right. She's probably sitting there thinking, oh, he loves me. He made a mistake. It was just one time. And then it happens again. And one time happens again. And then and it's really, really heartbreaking. It is. It's really heartbreaking. So it's really hard. So you also, and me and Desiree have talked about this. We're like, okay, so how can you support someone if you don't even know that it's happening? And then I'm like, well, this is when you look for the signs. When you notice the red flags and the signs of what's do they have a bruise on them? Well, why do they have a bruise on them? That's so know someone. She was in an abusive um marriage. It has guest starred. Her episode just dropped this week. And someone had mentioned to me, "Oh, that would actually make sense because when you notice that they're wearing a lot of makeup, it's usually because they're trying to cover up bruises." And it's not something that you would think of. But that's like one of the red flags that you could watch and look out for. Are they wearing a lot of makeup? Why are they wearing so much makeup? Is there a bruise on like just looking for the warning signs. So
Yeah, and it's been 20 years, and it's flown by extremely fast. I mean, it just seems like maybe 3 or 4 years ago that this happened. And how I also found healing, I'll never get over it. I'll never not see something or remind, every time I look at my cats, it reminds me of her. Um, you know, But I did go to the spot where he lost his life because when he took her life, he left. This was in the Bay Area. And when he took her life, he left in her car and ended up in Angels Camp, New Maloney's.
I have family out there.
Okay,
I know
so
exactly where that's at.
so at the lake up there. And people can Google this or whatever, it doesn't matter to me, but he, I guess, had family up in that area or something to that effect. And he ended up there at the boat dock, I believe it was. And basically, he wasn't going down without a fight. Um, he had already tried to take his own life after he took her life, which is very cowardly, in my opinion. And he, the police found him in the middle of the night, basically. And it made me angry for a long time because it was like when I went up there, I I decided to go up there because my boyfriend's parents were camping nearby. And I said, I want to go up there and just kind of, see how I feel. I haven't gone to his grave yet, but I have gone to where he lost his life. And I thought I went up to the top of the hill um above the boat docks and just looking out at the water and the sun glistening and you know the beauty of nature, that this is the last thing that he saw, but the last thing that she saw was a pillow over her face.
That's how he murdered her. So she was asleep. So she didn't even know it was coming at all to even be able to fight.
And so that kind of well, she must have woken up because I mean she had like hair in her hand when they found her. So she probably, eh,
Woke up,
probably at least
realized what was
grabbed him.
happening.
She probably at least grabbed him, but just thinking about, that kind of messed with me for a little bit, when I was up there, because I was like, the last thing that he saw was this, and the last thing that she saw was that. And but it was really healing too, because people would be like, well, why did you go up there? Well, because I wanted to be able to just leave it there at the lake. I wanted to be able to just say, this happened, and it's not necessarily that I forgive you, but I'm not going to let you have that power over me anymore and
Amen.
make me feel, really upset. I want to remember the good things about my sister that I've heard from other people. I want to remember, watching the DVD of her, with her best friend and smiling and laughing. Those are the things that I want in my mind. I don't want the last thing that she saw in my mind. And so I left it there at the lake. And when I left, I just felt like a sense of calm. And I just felt like, you know, I can leave that, and I can heal. Um, so that was really, I can't really explain it, but it really helped. It really, really helped. Because I didn't have that closure necessarily,
Right.
so that, that just leaving there, I felt so much better. And ever since then, I've not like really dwelled on it. I've not really, even given him very much of a thought at all. Um, so, that's what kind of helped me deal with it.
Well, I just want to say thank you for coming and sharing that story. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing that. I just want to remind the audience that's listening, that listeners, that have a safety plan. Don't let them know the safety plan. Make sure you have a support system, and just know, yeah, it's hard. It's hard to leave. It is so hard to leave. Um, you've fallen in love with this person, you've dedicated your life to them, all the things. Sometimes there's children involved, sometimes there's not, but either way, there is hope, there is healing, there is peace, and there is joy on the other side when you do finally get the courage to leave. So with that, thank you, Jennifer, for coming. Thank you guys for coming on this episode. Until next time, we'll see you.